Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world where winter doesn't politely knock on the door and leave after a few months. It moves in, rearranges the furniture, and stays for tens of thousands of years. You're about to lie down, not on a mattress, not even on a pile of straw, but on cold earth, stone, maybe frozen dirt, with the wind breathing through the cave mouth like it has a personal grudge. And I should warn you right away, you probably won't survive this, not because you're weak, but because the world you're about to enter had zero interest in comfort, safety, or your circadian rhythm. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, I want you to tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is there right now, midnight, early morning, somewhere in between, because time feels different when you're about to cross 400,000 years in your imagination. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in Ice Age Europe. The cold isn't cinematic. It's not dramatic snowflakes drifting gently past a moonlit cave entrance. It's pressure. It's a constant draining of heat from your skin, like the environment itself is slowly sipping warmth from your bones. And here's the strange part. You don't see a roaring fire, no crackling hearth, no orange glow dancing across the walls, just darkness, bodies, and breath. This is where Neanderthals sleep. The first thing you realise is how silent the night is. No engines, no insects buzzing in your ear, just wind, distant animal movement, and the soft, wet sound of breathing, yours and others close by. You're not alone because being alone is a death sentence out here. Solitary sleep is a luxury invented much later. Tonight, survival means proximity. Here's a solid historical fact to ground you. Neanderthals lived across Europe and parts of Western Asia from roughly 400,000 to 40,000 years ago, enduring multiple glacial cycles. These weren't just cold snaps. These were long stretches where ice sheets expanded, forests retreated, and temperatures regularly dropped far below freezing. And yet they persisted. Generation after generation, night after night. The weird part, the thing that probably brought you here, is that the archaeological evidence for consistent fire use among Neanderthals is surprisingly patchy. Some sites show hearths, others, especially earlier ones, show none at all. This has fueled a long-running scholarly debate. Did Neanderthals always know how to make fire, or did they only sometimes manage to keep it going when nature provided it first? You shift your weight on the ground and immediately regret it. Stone presses back. The cold seeps in faster when you move. Instinctively you curl inward, making yourself smaller. And without anyone teaching you, you're already doing something very Neanderthal, conserving heat by reducing surface area. Caves, despite what cartoons promised, are not warm. They're wind tunnels with better PR. The deeper you go, the more stable the temperature becomes. But stable doesn't mean comfortable. It means cold in summer, slightly less cold in winter. And near the entrance, where airflow exists and predators can be seen coming, the temperature fluctuates brutally. So why sleep here at all? Because outside is worse. Snow reflects moonlight, making you visible. Wind strips heat from your skin, and predators, hyenas, cave lions, wolves, are not impressed by your bedtime routine. Inside the cave, even without fire, you have stone walls that block wind and narrow access points that can be defended. It's not warmth, it's damage control. Here's a quirky, often overlooked fact. Neanderthal nasal cavities were larger than ours, likely helping them warm and humidify cold air before it reached their lungs. That means even while sleeping, their bodies were actively modifying the environment just to breathe safely. You, on the other hand, feel every icy inhale like a personal insult. You notice the smell, earthy, animal, human, no soap, no separation between living space and sleeping space, and yet your brain adapts faster than you expect. The smell becomes background noise, replaced by the more urgent awareness of cold and closeness. Bodies are pressed together, not romantically, practically. A shoulder against your back, legs tangled, someone's breath warming your neck. This isn't affection, it's thermal engineering. Shared body heat is more reliable than fire, which can go out, spread smoke, or attract attention. And this is where another debate creeps in quietly, like the cold itself. Some scholars argue that Neanderthals relied less on fire than Homo sapiens because their bodies were biologically better suited to cold. Stockier builds, shorter limbs, higher muscle mass. All of it reduced heat loss. Others argue the opposite, that fire was central, but the evidence simply didn't preserve well. As you lie there, trying not to think about frostbite, you realise how little sleep actually leaves behind. No beds, no pillows, just compressed soil and scattered fragments of plant matter, if that. Archaeologists are trying to reconstruct nighttime behaviour from almost nothing. Sleep doesn't fossilise. Warmth doesn't leave a clear signature in the dirt. Your eyelids grow heavy, not because you're comfortable, but because exhaustion eventually overrides discomfort. This is another reality check modern humans struggle with. Sleep doesn't require comfort. It requires survival. When the body needs rest badly enough, it will take it wherever it can. And as you drift toward a shallow, fragmented sleep curled inward among others doing the same, you begin to understand something unsettling. Neanderthals didn't conquer the cold by eliminating it. They endured it, night after night, winter after winter, without fireplaces, without guarantees, just breath, bodies, and time. You wake without really waking. Sleep here isn't a clean on-off switch, it's more like drifting up and down through layers of awareness, pulled back toward consciousness by cold toes or someone shifting beside you. Your eyes crack open to darkness so complete it feels solid, like you could lean against it. Time is meaningless. There's no sunrise alarm, no glowing phone screen to tell you it's 3:17 a.m. There's only the slow rhythm of breath around you, and the knowledge that the night isn't done yet. This is where you finally meet the Neanderthals, not as museum skeletons or textbook diagrams, but as the living, breathing bodies pressed close to yours. Their reputation, even now, is working against them. You've been trained to imagine them as clumsy half-animal brutes, barely hanging on until real humans showed up. Lying here among them, that stereotype starts to fall apart fast. Here's a firm historical fact. Neanderthals had brains as large as, and often slightly larger than, those of modern humans. In some cases, their average cranial capacity exceeded ours. Bigger brains don't automatically mean higher intelligence, but they do mean high energy demands, especially in the cold. That alone tells you these people were not barely scraping by. They were metabolically expensive, high-maintenance organisms that somehow made it work in one of the harshest climates humans have ever faced. You notice their bodies in a way that feels uncomfortably intimate. Thick torsos, broad shoulders, shorter forearms and lower legs. This wasn't random. This is classic cold climate adaptation, known as Allen's rule. Shorter limbs reduce surface area, which reduces heat loss. You, built for comfort in climate-controlled rooms, feel spindly and so exposed by comparison. A quirky but telling detail, Neanderthals likely had denser bones than modern humans, especially in their limbs. This made them heavier, yes, but also sturdier, less prone to fractures in falls or during hunts on icy terrain. When you imagine sleeping on hard ground, shifting your weight onto a dense, muscular frame, you realise how much punishment their bodies were designed to absorb. They don't snore politely. Sleep sounds here are raw, deep exhalations, the occasional grunt, the subtle teeth grinding of someone dreaming. And dreams do happen. Despite the cold, despite the danger, their brains still slip into the same neurological patterns yours does. REM sleep isn't a modern invention, it's ancient. There's a scholarly debate that hums beneath this scene. Were Neanderthals behaviourally modern in the same way Homo sapiens are? Did they plan deeply, tell stories, imagine futures? Or were they brilliant in the moment, masters of their environment without the same symbolic complexity? Nighttime is a strangely relevant place to ask this. Sleep, after all, is where memory consolidates and learning sticks. If Neanderthals slept differently, shorter cycles, lighter sleep, that could have shaped how they thought. You shift again, instinctively pulling a rough animal hide tighter around your shoulders. The hide smells faintly of fat and smoke, or maybe that's just wishful thinking. Whether or not there's a fire tonight, hides are non-negotiable. A single reindeer skin can reduce heat loss dramatically, especially when combined with body heat underneath. You finally understand why hunting wasn't just about food, it was about insulation. Here's a fringe-leaning but fascinating idea some researchers entertain. Neanderthals may have preferred sleeping naked, or nearly naked, under hides to maximise skin-to-skin heat transfer. Clothing traps air, which is great when layered properly, but poorly made clothing can actually increase heat loss. Without tailored garments, a shared hide over bare skin might have been more efficient. It's not a proven fact. But lying here, feeling warmth only where bodies touch, it doesn't sound crazy. You become aware of a child nearby, small and tucked between two larger bodies. This isn't sentimentality, it's survival logistics. Infants lose heat faster than adults, and their survival depends on constant warmth. This tells you something important. Neanderthals invested heavily in their young. They didn't abandon them to the cold. The fossil record backs this up. Juvenile Neanderthals show signs of long-term care, even when injured or sick. And then there are the older ones. You can feel them by the way their movements are slower, more deliberate. The fact that they're here at all is remarkable. Many Neanderthal skeletons show healed injuries that would have been debilitating or fatal without group support. That means people helped them, fed them, protected them, let them sleep in the warmest spots. That alone should dismantle the brutish myth. As your breathing syncs with the group, something subtle happens. The cold becomes manageable, not gone, but dulled. Your body stops fighting it so hard. Metabolism shifts downward. This is another debate in the background. Did Neanderthals have different baseline metabolic rates, especially at night? Some evidence suggests they burned energy faster, which would generate more internal heat but require more calories overall. If that's true, sleep wasn't just rest. It was a carefully balanced state between conserving energy and producing enough warmth to survive until morning. You don't know how much of this night remains. Hours, moments, time stretches and contracts. But one thing is clear now. In a way it wasn't before. These people were not primitive placeholders, waiting to be replaced. They were specialists, cold experts, masters of endurance. And you're still here, breathing with them, learning the rules of a world that never promised comfort. At some point, sleep loosens its grip just enough for you to notice the cold again. Not as a shock, but as a constant presence, like a low note humming beneath everything else. This is the world Neanderthals are built for. Not a single frozen landscape, but a planet that refuses to stay still. One winter bleeds into the next, but the shape of winter keeps changing. You're living through climate chaos, Ice Age edition. Here's the grounding historical fact for this stretch of the night. During Neanderthal existence, Earth cycled through dozens of abrupt climate fluctuations known as Dansgaard-Oeschger events. Temperatures in parts of Europe could shift dramatically within decades, sometimes even within a human lifetime. This wasn't a slow, predictable deep freeze, it was whiplash. Cold, then slightly less cold, then brutally cold again. You feel that instability in your bones. One year, snow piles high outside, the cave mouth, sealing you in and reflecting light like a cruel mirror. Another year, meltwater seeps in, turning the floor to mud that freezes solid overnight. There's no normal winter to adapt to, just constant recalibration. A common misconception is that Neanderthals lived in unbroken Arctic conditions. In reality, their world oscillated between tundra, steppe, open woodland, and forested pockets. That variability matters, because it means sleep strategies had to work across environments. You couldn't rely on the same shelter, the same animals, or even the same cave year after year. Which raises an uncomfortable question scholars still argue about. How much planning depth did Neanderthals have when it came to seasonal survival? Did they anticipate harsher winters and prepare bedding, hides, and shelter locations in advance? Or did they operate reactively, adapting in the moment as conditions shifted? As you lie there, you get the sense that the answer is probably both. The cave you're in wasn't chosen randomly. It faces away from prevailing winds. The entrance is narrow enough to block drafts but wide enough for quick escape. That's planning. But the bedding beneath you, a messy mix of trampled plant matter, fur and dirt, feels opportunistic, assembled from whatever was available nearby. Here's a quirky fact that often surprises people. Pollen analysis from some Neanderthal sites suggests they deliberately brought specific plants into caves. While this is sometimes discussed in the context of medicinal or symbolic use, there's another practical angle. Certain plants provide better insulation or repel insects. Even in freezing climates, parasites don't fully disappear. Comfort, such as it was, mattered. You roll slightly and a fine dust rises, catching in your throat. Cave air is stale, heavy with breath and smoke residue from fires that may or may not have burned here days or weeks ago. Another scholarly debate floats. Through the darkness, did Neanderthals avoid using fire inside caves to prevent smoke inhalation and oxygen depletion? Modern experiments show that poorly ventilated fires in caves can become dangerous quickly. Sleeping without fire might not have been ignorance. It might have been wisdom. Outside, the wind changes. You can hear it now, a distant moan that shifts pitch as it moves across the landscape. Wind is the real enemy. Cold alone can be managed. Wind strips heat faster than your body can replace it. This is why everyone instinctively turns their backs toward the cave mouth, presenting rounded spines and tucked limbs instead of exposed faces. Your position isn't random. You're learning the unspoken geometry of survival sleep. The night stretches. Sleep comes in fragments. You dream briefly, something abstract and impossible to translate. But you wake with your jaw clenched, teeth sore from grinding. That too is ancient. Dental wear patterns in Neanderthals suggest heavy use of teeth as tools, but stress and cold-induced clenching likely played a role as well. Sleep wasn't just rest. It was another physical task. A fringe but intriguing idea. Some researchers propose Neanderthals may have practiced segmented sleep to shorter sleep periods as with quiet wakefulness in between, similar to patterns documented in pre-industrial human societies. In long winter nights, this would make sense. Full unconsciousness for 8 straight hours might be risky when predators and weather are unpredictable. If that's true, then this half-awake state you're in right now isn't a failure to sleep. It's the system working as designed. You become aware of sounds beyond the cave, a distant howl, not close but close enough to register. The group doesn't panic. No one jumps up. That tells you something too. These people know the difference between immediate danger and background noise. Energy is precious. You don't waste it on every shadow. As hours pass, body heat slowly warms the small pocket of air beneath the hides. It's not cozy, but it's stable. Stability in this world is everything. By the time a faint grey light begins to creep into the cave, you realise something profound. Neanderthals didn't survive 400,000 years of freezing winters because they were comfortable. They survived because their lives were built around managing discomfort intelligently. Sleep wasn't about escape, it was about endurance. And morning, when it comes, won't bring relief. Just another round of cold, hunger and effort. But you've made it through the night. In this world, that counts as a victory. Morning doesn't arrive with warmth. It arrives with visibility. A thin, grey light seeps into the cave, revealing stone walls slick with condensation and the slow, stiff movement of bodies separating themselves from the night. You uncurl carefully. Muscles protest. Joints feel thick, like they've been packed with cold clay. This is what sleeping on stone does to you. Caves are shelter, yes, but cozy is a word invented by people with central heating. You take a better look around now, and the illusion shatters completely. This place isn't a home in the modern sense. It's a compromise. Here's the historical fact anchoring this moment. Most Neanderthal cave sites show evidence of intermittent, not permanent occupation. Layers of debris suggest repeated visits, abandonment, and return. Caves weren't lived in continuously for years on end. They were used strategically, during certain seasons, during certain threats, when conditions demanded it. Which makes sense, because caves are awful in ways you don't appreciate until you try to sleep in one. They're damp. Moisture seeps from the rock itself, condensing on ceilings and dripping down walls. That moisture pulls heat from the air and from your skin. Even wrapped in hides, you feel perpetually clammy. And the deeper you go, the more oxygen thins and smoke lingers. Fire, if used at all, has to be carefully managed, or avoided altogether. This feeds directly into one of the longest-running scholarly debates about Neanderthal sleep. Were they choosing cold over smoke? Modern experiments in replica caves show that even small fires can rapidly increase carbon monoxide levels in enclosed spaces. Sleeping with a fire might mean warmth, but not waking up. So imagine the calculation happening without words. Warmth versus breath. Flame versus air. The choice becomes obvious. You notice where people slept. Not deep in the cave, where air stagnates. Not right at the entrance, where wind and predators dominate. But in a narrow middle zone, close enough to light and escape, far enough to avoid drafts, this spatial awareness shows up again and again in archaeological patterns. Hearths, when present, are often offset. Sleeping areas cluster where airflow is best, not warmest. A quirky detail you wouldn't expect, cave ceilings. Sometimes show soot marks far from hearths, suggesting fires were used briefly, possibly earlier in the evening, then allowed to die before sleep. This supports the idea that Neanderthals used fire tactically, not as a constant companion, but as a tool brought out when the risk-benefit ratio made sense. You run your hand along the floor. It's uneven, but there's a faint softness to this beneath the surface. Trampled grasses, pine needles, bits of fur. Bedding doesn't look like bedding after thousands of years, but under fresh layers it works. Experimental archaeology has shown that even a few inches of plant matter can significantly reduce heat loss to the ground. Insulation below you matters as much as insulation above. The problem is maintenance. Bedding compresses, it rots, it attracts insects, which means it has to be replaced regularly. Another task, another drain on energy. This raises a subtle but important question. How much time did Neanderthals invest in sleep preparation versus immediate survival tasks like hunting and toolmaking? Some scholars argue that because Neanderthals faced higher caloric demands, they may have prioritized efficiency over comfort. Quick bedding, minimal fuss. Get down, get warm, get through the night. Others suggest that better sleep equals better hunting, better memory, better coordination, and that investment in sleep would pay off long term. Standing here in the pale morning light, you suspect they found a balance. Not perfect sleep, just enough. Outside, frost glitters on the ground. The landscape looks hostile but familiar. Open steppe stretches outward, dotted with scrub and the occasional stand of trees. This isn't the barren ice wasteland people imagine. It's productive, but only if you know how to read it. And Neanderthals did. One last odd fact lingers with you as the group stirs. Some cave sites show repeated sleeping in the exact same spots over generations, indicated by layered debris patterns. That suggests tradition, memory, a shared understanding of this is where we sleep. Even without words, even without permanent structures, places held meaning. Caves weren't warm homes, they were reliable ones. And in a world defined by unpredictability, reliability beats comfort every time. As the group begins to prepare for the day, you carry that lesson with you. Sleep here isn't about restoration in the modern sense. It's about survival bookkeeping, minimizing loss, managing risk, and waking up alive. And tonight, when darkness comes again, you'll do it all over. By the time night falls again, you're starting to understand that fire, that comforting symbol of human progress, was never a guaranteed companion. You feel its absence more than its presence. The darkness thickens early, swallowing colour and detail until the world reduces itself to outlines and sounds. Somewhere in the cave, someone sparks stone against stone, more out of hope than certainty. Nothing catches. Here's the historical fact that keeps archaeologists arguing late into the night. Clear, repeated evidence of controlled fire use by Neanderthals appears inconsistently across sites and time periods. Some locations show ash layers, burned bones, and charcoal. Others, occupied for thousands of years, show almost nothing. This inconsistency isn't easy to explain away by preservation alone, so you're left with an unsettling possibility. Fire, for long stretches of Neanderthal history, may have been rare, not unknown, but unreliable. You imagine what that means for sleep. No steady heat source, no light to push back the night, no psychological comfort of a glowing centre. When fire does appear, it's precious, fed carefully, guarded closely, and may be allowed to die before sleep to avoid smoke or oxygen loss. A fringe but increasingly discussed idea suggests Neanderthals may not have consistently known how to make fire, only how to maintain it once acquired, from natural sources like lightning strikes or wildfires. If that's true, then fire becomes a seasonal, situational luxury rather than a nightly routine. You don't plan your sleep around something that might not exist tomorrow. You feel that logic settle into your body as you lie down again. You don't wait for warmth that isn't coming. You prepare for cold instead. Without fire, darkness becomes complete. Your vision collapses inward. Hearing sharpens. You catch tiny sounds, fabric scraping hide, breath hitching, a distant drip of water from stone. This sensory shift likely shaped Neanderthal sleep in the ways we can barely reconstruct. Without artificial light, circadian rhythms follow natural cues more closely. Long winter nights mean long periods of rest. Not deep sleep, but sustained low activity. Some scholars argue that Neanderthals may have slept more overall during winter months, conserving energy when hunting was harder and calories scarcer. Sleep, in that sense, becomes a survival strategy. Less movement, less heat loss, fewer risks. You feel the group settle into familiar positions. Fire or no fire, the routine remains. Elders and children toward the centre. Stronger adults forming a loose perimeter. This isn't conscious planning. It's habit shaped by thousands of nights where the wrong arrangement meant someone didn't wake up. A strange thought drifts through you. Fire might actually disrupt this system. It creates shadows that move unnaturally. It attracts attention from outside. It encourages spacing rather than closeness. In a world where predators are drawn to light and sealed, darkness can be protective. This leads into another open debate. Did Neanderthals avoid fire at night intentionally to reduce predation risk? Modern hunter-gatherers often use low, shielded fires or none at all when danger is high. It's possible that the absence of fire in the archaeological record reflects strategic choice, not technological. Limitation. You pull the hide tighter. Without fire, every layer matters. Fur side inward, skin side outward. The orientation changes how heat is trapped. This isn't instinct alone, it's learned behaviour, passed down through observation. Children watch adults adjust hides. They copy. Knowledge spreads without language needing to explain it. Your toes still ache. Extremities suffer first. You curl them inward, pressing them against warmer parts of your body. This posture, knees drawn up, spine curved and more, is almost universal in cold sleepers. Fossilized joints don't tell us posture, but yours finds the shape without instruction. The night stretches again, and you notice something subtle, but important. Without firelight, no one stays awake long. The group sinks into stillness faster. Energy drains away into rest. Fire invites activity, storytelling, tool repair, social bonding. Its absence accelerates quiet. That doesn't mean Neanderthals lacked culture. It means culture adapted to constraint. Social moments likely clustered around times when fire was available. Nights like this one were about endurance, not expression. As sleep takes you, you realise how modern your assumptions have been. You expected fire to be central, essential, a line between humans and animals. But here, lying in the dark, alive despite the cold, that line blurs. Fire is useful, powerful, but it's not the only way to survive winter. And Neanderthals knew that long before anyone bothered to write it down. When you wake this time, it's because your hip has gone numb. Not cold, numb. The kind of numbness that creeps in slowly when pressure and temperature team up against circulation. You shift carefully, trying not to break the fragile balance of warmth that's built up overnight. This is when you realise something important. The ground itself is your biggest enemy. Stone doesn't just feel cold, it steals heat. Here's the historical fact anchoring this. Uncomfortable revelation. Archaeological evidence from multiple Neanderthal sites shows repeated use of plant materials, grasses, reeds and leafy branches, on cave floors likely as bedding. While these materials rarely preserve well, microscopic plant remains and soil compression patterns suggest intentional layering. You press your palm downward and feel it, the difference between bare rock and insulated earth. Even a thin layer of organic material interrupts thermal conduction. It's basic physics, but understanding it without textbooks or thermometers required generations of trial and error. Someone long before you learnt the hard way that sleeping directly on stone meant waking up stiff, sick, or not at all. The bedding here isn't neat. It's not evenly spread. There are thicker patches where people prefer to lie and thinner ones near the edges. That tells you something else. Bedding was personal. You didn't just lie anywhere. You chose your spot. Maybe you returned to it night after night, reshaping it with your body. A quirky detail that tends to get overlooked. Some experimental archaeologists have noted that pine needles, when crushed, release oils that can slightly repel insects and reduce microbial growth. Whether Neanderthals understood the chemistry or just noticed the effect doesn't matter. What matters is that certain plants would have been preferred, remembered, and sought out. You tug the hide aside and notice how the bedding smells faintly resinous, earthy, alive. It's not clean, but it's functional. And it raises a quiet scholarly debate. Did Neanderthals deliberately curate their sleeping materials? Or was this simply opportunistic use of what was nearby? The answer probably depends on the season. In deep winter, when plant matter is scarce, bedding might be minimal, scraped together from dried remnants or old layers. In warmer months, it could be refreshed more often. Sleep quality, like everything else, would fluctuate with the environment. You think about modern camping, the way a foam pad suddenly feels miraculous when you're on frozen ground. Now remove the foam, remove the tent, remove the option to leave. That's the baseline here. Children shift nearby and you hear the soft rustle of bedding as an adult adjusts it around them. This small act speaks volumes. Bedding isn't just insulation, it's care. It's someone choosing to spend energy making sure another body loses less heat overnight. There's another fringe idea that occasionally surfaces in academic circles, that Neanderthals may have used raised sleeping platforms made of wood or bone in some contexts, especially outside caves. Evidence is thin, mostly because wood doesn't preserve, but ethnographic parallels exist among cold-adapted hunter-gatherers. If true, it would mean Neanderthals understood not just insulation, but elevation, lifting bodies off cold ground entirely. You look around the cave and imagine it. Poles wedged into cracks, branches layered across them, hides on top, temporary, impermanent, gone without a trace thousands of years later. Archaeology would miss it completely. This is the frustration scholars live with. Sleep leaves almost nothing behind. As the night deepens again, you settle more deliberately. You press bedding under your shoulder, tuck it beneath your hip. You're learning slowly how to sleep here, or not well, but better. That adaptation is the real story. Neanderthals didn't discover one perfect solution to winter sleep. They assembled a toolkit. Hides above, plants below, bodies close, movement minimized. Each element alone is insufficient. Together they work. Your breathing slows. The ground still leaches warmth, but not as fast. The hide traps air, the body beside you radiates heat. This is engineering without blueprints. As sleep comes, it carries a new respect. Not for ingenuity alone, but for patience, for the willingness to endure minor, suffering every night to avoid major catastrophe. Stone will always be cold, winter will always come, but tonight at least you've stacked the odds just enough in your favour. The hide over you shifts, and for a moment you feel exposed, like a seal popping its head above icy water. Cold air rushes in immediately, sharp and invasive. Someone adjusts the edge without a word, tucking it back into place with practiced efficiency. That single movement tells you how much of Neanderthal sleep depended on animal skins. They weren't optional, they were everything. Here's the historical fact grounding this realization. Cut marks and wear patterns on Neanderthal stone tools indicate extensive hide processing. Scrapers in particular are found in enormous numbers at Neanderthal sites, suggesting that skin preparation was a major, time-consuming activity. This wasn't casual, it was essential infrastructure. You feel the hide's texture against your face. One side is coarse, the mishudhur, hair still attached. The other is smoother, stiff with dried fat. The orientation matters. Hair traps air, fat repels moisture. Used correctly, a single large hide can dramatically reduce heat loss. Used incorrectly, it's just dead weight. A quirky but telling detail, experimental studies show that hides retain insulating properties even when wet, far better than woven plant fibres. In a damp cave or snowy environment, that resilience makes the difference between discomfort and hypothermia. Wool jackets wish they were this honest. This leads straight into an ongoing scholarly debate. How sophisticated was Neanderthal clothing? Did they simply drape hides over themselves? Or did they create fitted garments? The absence of bone needles in most Neanderthal contexts suggests less tailoring than later Homo sapiens. But tailoring isn't binary. You don't need needles to cut, fold, tie, or pin skins into effective shapes. Lying here, wrapped tightly, you suspect their clothing was situational. During activities, their hides might be worn like cloaks or capes, allowing the movement. During sleep, everything becomes simpler, Maximize coverage, minimize gaps, pile it on. You become aware of how heavy the hide is. This isn't a lightweight blanket. It presses down, limiting movement. At first that feels uncomfortable, then it feels reassuring. The weight keeps it from shifting in the night. It seals in warmth. It discourages tossing and turning, which only creates drafts. Modern weighted blankets get a lot of praise. Neanderthals were using the original version without marketing. There's another fringe idea whispered in academic circles, that Neanderthals may have favoured multiple thin hides layered together, rather than a single thick one. Layering creates trapped air pockets, improving insulation. It also allows flexibility. You can remove or add layers as conditions change. Again, the material evidence rarely survives, but the logic is sound. You notice the smell. Again, animal, musky, faintly rancid. Fat goes sour. Hides need maintenance. They have to be scraped, dried, smoked, reworked. That smell isn't neglect, it's effort. It's the smell of labour invested in staying alive. As you settle deeper into sleep, your body heat slowly warms the space beneath the hide. It's a fragile warmth, easily disrupted. That's why no one moves much once settled. Movement is the enemy of thermal stability. Children are tucked under the hides first. You watch an adult pull the edge lower over a small head, leaving only a nose exposed. This isn't sentimentality. Children have less muscle mass, less fat, and higher surface area relative to volume. They lose heat fast. Protecting them during sleep is non-negotiable. This care undermines another outdated myth that Neanderthals were emotionally indifferent. The fossil record shows long-term care for injured individuals, healed fractures, survival well beyond what solitary life would allow. Nights like this are where that care becomes most visible. You drift, half asleep, half aware of the steady warmth building beneath the hide. Fire would be nice, but in its absence, this works. It's quiet, dark, efficient, and suddenly the question shifts. It's no longer, how did they survive without fireplaces? It's, how did they build such reliable systems without depending on a single fragile solution? Hides don't spark, they don't smoke, they don't go out in the wind, they just do their job. By now, you've stopped thinking of warmth as something you get. It's something you build minute by minute, body by body. The most reliable heat source in this cave isn't fire, hides, or bedding. It's flesh, yours included. Here's the historical fact that makes this impossible to ignore. Neanderthal group sizes were likely small, but sleeping clusters appear to have been dense. Spatial analysis of cave sites suggests people slept in close proximity rather than spread out. This pattern isn't about social preference, it's thermodynamics. You feel it as you lie there, your back pressed against another body, your legs tangled with someone else's. Heat radiates outward, pooling in the centre of the group. The difference between sleeping alone and sleeping together is night and day, literally life and death. A quirky but deeply human detail. Modern studies of cold exposure show that shared body heat can reduce caloric burn significantly during rest. In other words, cuddling saves energy. Neanderthals didn't need the study. Their survival depended on the result. You notice how the group naturally forms a rough oval, minimizing exposed edges. Those on the outside curl inward more tightly, acting as a buffer against drafts. Those in the center barely move at all. This isn't assigned. It emerges through habit and experience. People who sleep cold gravitate inward. Those who can tolerate more exposure end up on the edges. This leads to an open, scholarly debate with emotional weight. How did Neanderthals manage social tension in such close quarters? Personal space is a modern luxury. Here, bodies overlap, smells mingle, privacy disappears. Conflict would have to be managed, or the system fails. Some anthropologists argue that high interdependence in extreme environments fosters cooperation and emotional regulation. Others point out that stress could just as easily spark violence. The fossil record offers hints but no clear answer. What it does show is low evidence of interpersonal trauma compared to some later human populations. That suggests something about social dynamics worked, at least well enough. You feel someone's heartbeat through their shoulder blade. Slow, heavy, resting. Your own gradually sinks. This physiological mirroring isn't mystical. It's well documented in humans and other social mammals. Shared sleep stabilizes breathing and heart rate, promoting deeper rest even in hostile environments. Another fringe idea floats through academic discussions that Neanderthals may have relied more heavily on touch-based communication than later humans, especially in low-light conditions. At night, without fire, touch becomes the primary sensory channel. A shift, a press, a tightening of the cluster communicates safety or alarm without sound. You realise you've been doing the same thing unconsciously. When someone moves, you adjust. When the hide slips, you pull it back, not just for yourself, but for the group. Sleep here is collective. One person's comfort affects everyone's survival. This raises a quiet but profound point. Neanderthals' sleep likely reinforced social bonds nightly. Modern humans often see sleep as private downtime. For them, it was shared vulnerability. You trusted the people around you not to abandon you to the cold, not to roll away and break the thermal seal. Outside, the wind rises again. You hear it scrape across stone like something searching. The group tightens almost imperceptibly. No one wakes fully. There's no panic, just a collective adjustment brought. This is endurance refined to an art. Your face is tucked into the curve of an arm or shoulder. Breath warms your skin. Condensation forms, then dissipates. You're uncomfortable, yes, but you're warm enough. That threshold, enough, is the key. You think back to the opening question, the one that probably hooked you. No fireplaces, no hearths, how did they survive? This is how. Not with a single innovation, but with layered solutions. Biology, behaviour, social structure, physics, all working quietly night after night. As sleep deepens, you stop counting the cold. You stop wishing for fire. Your body learns the rules of this place. And for the first time, you're not just enduring the night. You belong in it. You don't choose your sleeping position anymore. It chooses you. Curled, compressed, folded into the collective shape of the group, your body has learned where warmth lives and where it leaks away. This is what Neanderthal nights do best. They train you without instruction. Tonight, you're packed tighter than any before. Here's the historical fact anchoring this scene. Skeletal evidence and site reconstruction suggest Neanderthals lived in small, closely related groups, often no more than 10 to 20 individuals. In such groups, nighttime arrangements weren't random. Kinship mattered. Familiar bodies slept together repeatedly, reinforcing patterns of warmth and safety. You feel it now, the way everyone settles into almost the same configuration as the night before. Certain people always end up near the centre. Others consistently form the outer ring. This isn't hierarchy in a political sense, it's physiology. Larger bodies radiate more heat. Stronger adults tolerate colder exposure. Children and elders migrate inward. A quirky detail you wouldn't expect. Modern thermal imaging studies of people sleeping in cold conditions show that group sleepers create a measurable heat island, with temperatures several degrees warmer at the centre than at the edges. That's physics playing favourites. Neanderthals exploited it nightly. You notice how limbs are arranged. Arms tucked, knees drawn up, feet pressed against warmer torsos instead of stretching into cold air. Open postures disappear. Everything is compact. This posture reduces exposed surface area and slows heat loss, a behaviour mirrored in cold-adapted mammals from wolves to musk oxen. And then there's the pile itself. Family piles, sleep clusters, whatever you want to call them, they're the difference between life and death when fire isn't guaranteed. The word pile sounds crude, but what's happening is surprisingly refined. People adjust constantly, micro-movements that maintain contact without waking the group. This brings up an open, scholarly debate that rarely gets airtime. How did Neanderthals manage sleep? Disruptions? In modern life, even small disturbances feel intolerable. Here, movement is inevitable. Someone coughs, a child shifts, an elder groans, yet the system works. Some researchers argue that Neanderthals likely experienced lighter, more flexible sleep cycles, waking briefly and often without stress. Others suggest that high physical exhaustion allowed deeper sleep despite disturbances. The truth may be both, context-dependent, season-dependent. You feel a child wedge closer, seeking warmth without waking fully. An adult responds automatically, repositioning a hide, creating a pocket of air that traps heat. No words, no thought, just practice. This moment undercuts another long-standing myth, that Neanderthals lacked complex social behaviour. Nighttime tells a different story. You don't coordinate sleep like this without trust, memory, and empathy. You don't survive hundreds of thousands of winters by accident. There's a fringe but compelling idea that Neanderthal sleep clusters may have doubled as protection against predators. A tight group presents a larger, more intimidating mass. Sudden movement by one person ripples through the cluster, waking others quickly. You're never truly alone, even in sleep. Outside, something passes near the cave entrance. You hear it, soft, heavy steps, then silence. The group stiffens, collectively holding breath. You feel heartbeats quicken around you, but nothing enters. After a long moment, bodies relax again. This is why clusters matter. One sleeper hears, another smells, a third feels vibration through the ground. Sleep here is distributed awareness. You drift again, deeper this time. The cold fades to a distant ache. Warmth pulses at the core of the group. You're no longer an individual body of fighting winter. You're part of a larger organism, many bodies sharing heat, risk, and rest. This is the truth hidden behind the question of fireplaces. Fire is individual. Clusters are communal. One fails, easily. The other adapts. And tonight, pressed shoulder to shoulder, breath to breath, you understand why Neanderthals trusted each other more than flame. By now, the cold feels less like an enemy and more like a constant negotiation. Your body has learned how much heat it can afford to lose and how much it needs to hold on to. That negotiation didn't happen by accident. It's written into Neanderthal biology. You feel it every time you shift, how dense the bodies around you are, how solid, how compact. This isn't just muscle built by hard lives, it's evolutionary design. Here's the historical fact anchoring this realization. Neanderthals had a higher average muscle mass and more robust skeletons than modern humans, even when controlling for height. Their bodies were metabolically expensive but exceptionally good at generating and retaining heat, particularly in cold climates. Muscle is a furnace. Even at rest, it produces heat. The more muscle you carry, the warmer you stay, but the more calories you need. This trade-off defines Neanderthal life. Sleep, especially winter sleep, becomes a critical moment where metabolic efficiency matters most. You notice how heavy everyone feels. When someone shifts, the weight is real. Dense bones, thick torsos. These bodies aren't built for long-distance running in open savannas. They're built to endure cold, to hold heat close to the core. A quirky biological detail. Neanderthals had a wider ribcage and larger lung capacity relative to body size. This likely supported higher oxygen intake, fueling their energy-hungry muscles. It also meant more internal space for organs generating heat. You're not just wrapped in hides, you're wrapped in biology. This leads directly into an open, scholarly debate. Did Neanderthals have higher basal metabolic rates than modern humans? Some evidence suggests yes, especially in colder environments. Others argue their metabolism was similar, but their body shape reduced heat loss enough to compensate. The answer matters, because it changes how we understand their sleep. If metabolism stayed high at night, Neanderthals would generate more heat during sleep, but they'd also need more food to sustain it. That would make daytime hunting success even more critical. Sleep wouldn't just be rest, it would be a costly but necessary investment. You become aware of how still the group is now. Earlier in the night there was constant shifting. Now movement has nearly stopped. This is when heat balance is achieved. Bodies settle into minimal motion to conserve energy. Even breathing seems slower. This stillness mirrors what we see in modern cold-adapted mammals. Reindeer, seals and bears reduce activity during rest to maintain core temperature. Neanderthals weren't copying animals consciously, but they were subject to the same physical laws. There's another fringe hypothesis worth mentioning, that Neanderthals may have entered mild, hypothermic states during sleep, intentionally or not. Not dangerous hypothermia, but slight drops in core temperature that reduce metabolic demand. Some modern humans experience this naturally during sleep. In extreme cold, even a small drop could conserve calories. It's difficult to test archaeologically, but lying here, feeling your body sink into a slower rhythm, it feels plausible. Sleep here isn't about luxury, it's about efficiency. You also notice how little fat there is on many bodies. Neanderthals were muscular, not soft. Yet they still relied on fat strategically, especially around the core. Fat isn't just energy storage, it's insulation. Even a few millimeters make a difference when nights stretch on for hours. This ties into another debate. Did Neanderthals deliberately consume high-fat diets to support cold survival? Evidence from isotopic analysis suggests heavy reliance on large game animals, rich in fat and protein. That diet would support both muscle, maintenance and nighttime heat production. As the night deepens, you feel secure in a way that has nothing to do with comfort. Your body is doing what it evolved to do. Slow down, hold heat, survive. Fire would help, of course it would. But fire is external, biology is always with you. And for Neanderthals, biology did a lot of the heavy lifting when winter came. If you could step outside your body for a moment, just long enough to look back at the group from a distance, you'd see something almost sculptural. Rounded forms, short lines, no sharp angles. Everyone looks compact. That shape isn't accidental, it's physics written in flesh. Here's the historical fact grounding this image. Neanderthals followed Bergmann's and Allen's rules closely. Biological principles stating that animals in cold climates tend to have larger bodies and shorter limbs to reduce heat loss. Compared to modern humans, Neanderthals had shorter forearms, shorter lower legs, broader bodies overall. You feel that advantage every time the cold presses in. Your arms are tucked, your legs drawn close, your spine curved into a near-perfect heat-conserving arc. Long, thin limbs would betray you here, bleeding warmth into the dark. Neanderthal proportions don't. A quirky anatomical detail. Neanderthal fingers were slightly shorter and more robust than ours. That might not sound important until you realise how vulnerable fingers are to frostbite. Less surface area means less heat lost. Even hands were optimised for cold. This anatomical efficiency plays out most clearly at night. During the day you can move, hunt, work, generate heat through activity. At night, stillness exposes weaknesses. Bodies built for warmth survive. Bodies built for speed struggle. This leads into an open, scholarly debate that has implications beyond sleep. Did Neanderthals' cold-adapted bodies limit their ability to compete with Homo sapiens in warmer, more variable climates? Some argue their specialization was a strength in Ice Age Europe, but a liability during rapid climate shifts. Others counter that Neanderthals were more flexible than we give them credit for. Lying here, you suspect the truth sits in the middle. Their bodies were brilliant solutions to a specific problem, but solutions always come with trade-offs. You feel your calves pressed against someone else's thighs. Shorter lower legs mean muscles cluster closer to the core, where heat is easier to maintain. Blood doesn't have to travel as far through cold extremities. Even circulation benefits from this build. There's another fringe idea occasionally discussed, that Neanderthals may have experienced less peripheral vasoconstriction than the modern humans, allowing more consistent blood flow to extremities in cold conditions. This is speculative, but it would explain lower frostbite risk despite extreme exposure. Your toes still ache, though. Biology isn't magic. It just stacks the wooey deck. You notice scars on some bodies in the dim light, old injuries, healed fractures. These people lived hard lives, but they lived long enough for bones to knit back together. Peace. That means repeated winters survived, repeated nights slept through. Sleep here isn't restorative in the modern sense. It's cumulative. Each night you survive adds a little resilience to the next. Your body learns. Your mind adjusts. And then there's the psychological side. Being built for cold doesn't just affect heat retention, it affects how you experience cold. Neanderthals likely perceived cold differently than you do. Not because they were tougher, but because their baseline was different. What feels unbearable to you might feel merely unpleasant to them. This raises a quiet but important point. Modern humans often underestimate ancient resilience because we measure it against modern expectations. We assume comfort is necessary. It isn't. Adaptation is. As sleep deepens again, you stop. Fighting the cold, you accept it as background. Your posture tightens, your breathing steadies, and the night passes not in defiance but in cooperation. Neanderthals didn't conquer winter by overpowering it. They shaped themselves around it. Sometime deep in the night, you become aware of your core, your chest, your belly, radiating warmth, while everything else feels like it belongs to the cave. This isn't an accident. It's strategy, written into tissue you rarely think about. Fat. Not the soft, modern kind you try to avoid, but functional, survival-grade insulation. Here's the historical fact anchoring this moment. Isotopic analysis of Neanderthal bones shows diets extremely high in animal protein and fat. often comparable to top-level Ice Age carnivores. This wasn't a preference, it was necessity. Fat fueled their metabolism and helped them survive cold environments. Fat does two crucial things during sleep. It stores energy and it slows heat loss. Even a modest layer around the torso can make a measurable difference in how quickly your core temperature drops overnight. You feel that now, how your chest stays warm even when your hands and feet protest. A quirky biological detail, fat tissue releases hormones that influence metabolism and temperature regulation. In cold-adapted populations, these processes can shift subtly, prioritizing core warmth over extremity comfort. You're not imagining the numb toes, your body has made a choice. This leads into an open scholarly debate with real consequences. How much body fat did Neanderthals actually carry? Traditional reconstructions often depict them as extremely lean, all muscle and sinew, but some researchers argue they may have carried more subcutaneous fat than previously assumed, especially seasonally, as a buffer against winter scarcity. The fossil record doesn't preserve fat, so this debate remains unresolved. But lying here, feeling how essential insulation is, it's hard to imagine surviving without it. You notice how people arrange themselves based on body composition. Larger, heavier individuals, likely with more muscle and fat, gravitate toward colder edges. Smaller bodies cluster inward. This isn't charity, it's efficiency. Everyone plays the role their physiology suits best. There's a fringe hypothesis worth mentioning. Neanderthals may have had higher levels of brown adipose tissue, brown fat, which generates heat rather than storing energy. Modern humans have it in small amounts, especially in infancy. Cold-adapted populations often retain more. If Neanderthals had more brown fat, nighttime heat generation would have been significantly improved. It's speculative, but it fits the pattern. You also realise something unsettling. Fat doesn't just keep you warm, it keeps you alive when food runs low. Sleep and starvation are tightly linked. During long winters, caloric intake drops. Sleep becomes longer, activity decreases, and fat reserves bridge the gap. This reframes sleep entirely. It's not just about rest, it's about managing energy stores across weeks and months. Neanderthals weren't sleeping to feel good. They were sleeping to not starve. A small movement ripples through the group as someone readjusts a hide. You feel warmth leak, then seal again. The system corrects itself. You think about modern diet culture, about how disconnected it is from survival reality. Here, fat is precious, desired, actively maintained. As the night drags on, your stomach feels heavy but calm. A good meal before sleep matters here more than anything else. Hunting success echoes into the night. Well-fed bodies sleep warmer. Hungry ones shiver. This creates another layer of social interdependence. If the group eats well, the group sleeps well. If not, everyone pays. By the time your mind drifts again, you understand something fundamental. Neanderthal winter sleep wasn't built around one trick, fire, or caves, or hides. It was built around bodies designed, fueled, and arranged to survive cold together. The night feels longer now, not because time has slowed, but because your body has entered a different rhythm, one that treats darkness as a signal to conserve, not to conquer. Your breathing deepens, then shallows. Your thoughts blur at the edges. This is metabolism at work while you sleep. Here's the historical fact anchoring this quiet shift. Neanderthals had higher overall energy demands than modern humans, partly due to their muscular builds and cold environments. Estimates suggest they required hundreds more calories per day just to maintain body temperature and basic function. At night, that demand doesn't disappear, it changes. You feel your body slip into a slower mode, reducing movement, minimizing heat loss. Muscles relax but don't fully shut down. There's a low, steady burn happening beneath your skin. Sleep here isn't shut down, it's controlled idling. A quirky physiological detail. Modern humans show a drop in core body temperature during sleep, typically by about 1 degree Celsius. In cold environments, this drop can be dangerous unless counterbalanced by insulation or shared warmth. Neanderthals likely experienced similar drops, but their environment forced them to manage it carefully. This opens as a scholarly debate that's surprisingly difficult to resolve. Did Neanderthals sleep differently at a physiological level? Some researchers suggest their sleep cycles may have been shorter, with more frequent micro-awakenings to adjust posture, check surroundings, or respond to cold. Others argue that extreme physical exertion would have pushed them into deeper, more consolidated sleep despite environmental stress. Lying here, you suspect both are true at different times. After a successful hunt, bodies collapse into deeper rest. After a lean day, sleep stays light, alert. Your dreams, when they come, are fragmented. Not stories, but sensations, movement, pressure, warmth. That fits with what we know about REM sleep under stress. It shortens, it changes shape, but it doesn't disappear. Even here, even now, the brain needs its strange nightly housekeeping. There's a fringe but intriguing idea that Neanderthals may have experienced more polyphasic sleep patterns, short bouts of sleep interspersed with wakefulness, especially during long winter nights. Ethnographic studies of pre-industrial societies show similar patterns when nights are long and artificial light is absent. If true, then waking briefly in the dark wouldn't be a problem. It would be expected. You stir, adjust to hide, press closer to warmth, then drift again. No anxiety, no clock watching. You feel hunger stir faintly, even in sleep. Metabolism doesn't forget. It reminds you that warmth costs energy, that tomorrow's hunt matters, that survival is always one meal away from crisis. Yet there's calm here too. Routine breeds confidence. The group has done this before, thousands of times before. Night follows day, cold follows darkness, and still morning comes. You listen to breathing around you, slow, heavy, synchronized. This shared rhythm isn't accidental, it's stabilizing. Social mammals often synchronize sleep patterns, reducing individual vulnerability. Neanderthals were no exception. As the hours pass, your body finds its balance point, the sweet spot where heat generation and heat loss meet. Shivering stops, muscles loosen. You're not warm, but you're stable. That's the goal. In modern life, sleep is about optimization, tracking, metrics, perfect conditions. Here, sleep is about sufficiency, enough rest to function, enough warmth to live. As the darkest part of the night finally begins to thin, you realize something quietly profound. Neanderthals didn't sleep badly. They slept appropriately. Appropriate for a world that never promised comfort. You wake just enough to feel fabric, or what passes for fabric, brush against your skin. So not woven. It's folded, overlapped, tied, maybe pinned with a sliver of bone or wood. Clothing here doesn't look like clothing in a museum diorama. It looks improvised, alive, constantly adjusted. And that raises a question that has kept researchers arguing for decades. How dressed were Neanderthals really? Here's the historical fact grounding this uncertainty. Unlike later Homo sapiens, Neanderthals left behind very little direct evidence of tailored clothing. Bone needles with eyes, clear markers of fitted garments, are rare or absent in most Neanderthal contexts. Yet they lived in climates where naked exposure would have been fatal. So something filled the gap. You feel it now, a hide draped over the shoulders, another wrapped around hips, maybe a third folded under thighs. This isn't fashion, it's modular insulation, clothing without seams but not without intelligence. A quirky but revealing detail. Wear. Patterns on Neanderthal teeth suggest they often held materials in their mouths while working, possibly softening hides or holding them taut while cutting. Teeth as tools. This implies hide processing was hands-on, intimate, and constant. Clothing wasn't made once and forgotten, it was maintained daily. This leads straight into an open scholarly debate. Did Neanderthals use complex clothing systems that simply didn't preserve? Or were their garments fundamentally simpler than those of later humans? Some argue that fitted clothing gave Homo sapiens a crucial edge in colder climates. Others counter that Neanderthal body shape reduced the need for tight-fitting garments in the first place. Lying here, wrapped but not restricted, you can see both sides. Loose hides allow flexibility. They adjust easily during sleep. They can be piled, shared, rearranged. Fitted clothing excels during movement, but at night simplicity wins. You notice how no one fully separates clothing from bedding. A hide worn during the day becomes a blanket at night. The line between garment and sleep gear dissolves. This reduces material needs and keeps everything close to the body's warmth. There's a fringe idea that Neanderthals may have used simple tying techniques, thongs made from sinew or plant fibers, to secure hides at key points. Not tailoring, but fastening. Enough to keep coverage in place without restricting movement. Again, perishable materials leave little trace. You feel a knot under your shoulder blade. It's uncomfortable, but it holds the hide closed. You shift slightly to accommodate it rather than undo it. Heat retention beats comfort every time. Children are bundled more thoroughly, smaller hides layered over smaller bodies. Adults adjust these bundles automatically when a child stirs. This tells you clothing knowledge was transmitted early. Kids learned where to wrap, how to fold, when to tighten. Another quiet debate emerges here. Did Neanderthals experience less social differentiation through clothing? Without elaborate garments or ornamentation, identity may have been expressed differently. Through behaviour, skill, kinship, sleep strips even that away. At night everyone looks the same, just bodies wrapped against cold. As the night deepens again, you stop noticing where clothing ends and bedding begins. Everything merges into one system designed to slow heat loss. You're insulated not by design, but by accumulation. And maybe that's the point. Neanderthal survival wasn't built on a single breakthrough like sewing or fireplaces. It was built on redundancy, layers, overlaps, systems that worked even when one piece failed. Your hide slips slightly as you drift back towards sleep. Someone tucks it in without opening their eyes, no needles, no seams, just enough. The wind finds the cave before the cold does. You hear it first, a low, wandering sound that slides across stone, testing every crack and curve. Wind is patient. It doesn't rush. It searches. And if it finds a way in, the temperature follows fast behind. This is why where you sleep matters as much as how. Here's the historical fact anchoring this moment. Neanderthal sites show repeated, consistent use of specific cave zones and rock shelters that minimize exposure to prevailing winds. Orientation matters. South-facing entrances are favored in colder regions, while natural windbreaks, outcroppings, narrow passages, collapsed rock are used deliberately. You feel that choice now. The cave mouth isn't a wide yawn. It's a controlled opening, angled just enough to let in light without inviting the wind to stay. Cold air still sneaks through, but it's broken, slowed, weakened. This leads to a quiet but important realization. Shelter isn't just about having a roof, it's about shaping our airflow. A quirky, often overlooked detail. Modern experiments in replica rock shelters show that even small stone arrangements, low walls, stacked rocks, or piled debris can reduce wind speed dramatically inside a sleeping area. Neanderthals didn't need architecture, they needed placement. You notice stones near the entrance that aren't quite natural. Not a wall, not a structure, just arranged, enough to deflect a draft, enough to keep sleeping bodies out of the wind's direct path. There's an open scholarly debate here too. How much did Neanderthals modify their sleeping environments? Some argue they were passive users of natural spaces. Others suggest they actively engineered micro-shelters, temporary low-effort adjustments that wouldn't survive archaeologically. Lying here, feeling how even a slight breeze steals warmth instantly, you lean toward the second view. You don't ignore wind if it can kill you. Snow outside amplifies the effect. Wind scours it across the ground, creating a sound like dry sand. Inside the cave, the temperature holds steady. Not warm, but predictable. Predictability is the prize. You tuck your chin closer to your chest, turning your face away from the faint draft that creeps along the floor. Cold air sinks. Warm air rises. Everyone here sleeps slightly elevated, on bedding, on hides, sometimes on natural rock shelves. Anything to lift vital organs out of the coldest layer. Another fringe idea surfaces. Neanderthals may have oriented their bodies deliberately relative to airflow, sleeping perpendicular rather than parallel to drafts to reduce exposure. Ethnographic parallels exist among Arctic peoples who sleep with keen awareness of wind direction. You feel it now. Your back faces the entrance. Your face is shielded by another body and a folded hide. Eyes, nose, mouth, protected. Extremities tucked. The wind slides past without finding purchase. The cave itself works with you. Stone absorbs temperature slowly. Once cooled, it stays cold, but it also buffers against rapid drops. Sudden cold snaps outside don't hit you all at once. The rock smooths the extremes. That buffering effect may explain why caves remained attractive despite their dampness. In a world of violent climate swings, stability beats dryness. You drift again, half awake, half listening. The wind rises, then falls, snow hisses, then quiets. The group barely moves, the system holds. This is the part modern imagination misses. Survival here isn't dramatic, it's subtle. It's about reducing exposure by small margins again and again until the night passes. No fireplaces, no roaring flames, just wind broken, drafts deflected, bodies arranged with care. And that, surprisingly, is enough. By now, the smell has fully embedded itself in your awareness. Not offensively, just undeniably. Earth, animal fat, old smoke, human bodies that haven't known soap, perfume, or the concept of personal freshness. In this world, hygiene is not about comfort. It's about survival trade-offs. Here's the historical fact anchoring the uncomfortable truth. There is no archaeological evidence that Neanderthals practiced regular bathing or cleaning of living spaces in the modern sense. What we do see are heavily reused storage sites with layered debris, bones, ash, plant matter, accumulating over repeated visits. And yet, no one here seems bothered by it. That's because smell in this environment is information. It tells you who is near, who belongs, who doesn't. Familiar scents mean safety. Strange ones mean danger. Cleanliness, as a concept, would actually remove useful signals. A quirky detail that modern noses struggle with. Many wild animals, including predators, are far more tolerant of strong smells than we are. What attracts attention isn't odour alone, but novelty. A cave that smells consistently of humans and smoke may actually discourage some animals, marking it as occupied and risky. This ties into a scholarly debate that rarely gets discussed outside anthropology circles. Did Neanderthals deliberately tolerate or even cultivate strong living smells as a form of passive deterrence? There's no direct evidence, but ethnographic parallels exist among hunter-gatherer groups who avoid masking scents in predator-rich environments. You wrinkle your nose slightly, then stop. There's no point. The smell fades into the background as your brain reprioritizes. Cold matters. Warmth matters. Smell becomes irrelevant unless it signals danger. There's another practical angle too. Washing requires water. Water freezes. Wet skin loses heat rapidly. In winter, staying dry matters far more than staying clean. Any activity that increases moisture, washing, sweating unnecessarily, can be deadly. You feel how dry the air is against your face despite the damp stone. Skin cracks, lips split, fat smeared on hides, and skin likely served multiple purposes, softening leather, repelling moisture, and protecting exposed skin from windburn. It's greasy, unpleasant by modern standards, but effective. Children smell strongest of all: milk, fat, earth. They're not isolated because of it. They're drawn closer. Smell here is not something to correct. It's something to accept. This acceptance reshapes social tolerance. Close quarters demand forgiveness. You don't survive packed together in darkness if every irritation becomes conflict. That includes smell, sound, touch. Nighttime forces emotional regulation long before language can explain it. As sleep deepens again, you realise something quietly radical. Neanderthals didn't just adapt physically to the cold, they adapted psychologically to discomfort. They recalibrated what mattered. Modern humans often imagine ancient life as miserable, but misery requires expectation. Here there is none. The baseline is endurance. Anything better is a bonus. The smell remains, but it no longer bothers you. It just means you're not alone. The darkness is absolute now. Not the cosy, dim darkness of a bedroom, but thick, swallowing black that erases edges and distances. Your eyes are open, but it makes no difference. Without fire, without moonlight reaching deep enough, night becomes a physical thing, and this is how Neanderthals sleep most often, without light. Here's the historical fact anchoring this stretch of the night. There is no evidence that Neanderthals used artificial lighting, such as oil lamps or torches, regularly inside caves during sleep hours. When fire was absent or extinguished, darkness was complete. Their circadian rhythms were governed almost entirely by natural light cycles. You feel it in your body. Darkness presses your awareness inward. There's nothing to look at, so your mind stops trying. Thoughts slow. Sensations become abstract. You're not bored. You're not restless. You're simply yours. You're quiet. A quirky neurological detail. In modern humans, prolonged darkness increases melatonin production, deepening sleep pressure and altering dream patterns. Without artificial light to interrupt this process, sleep becomes longer, more fluid, and less rigidly structured. Neanderthal nights likely flowed this way, long stretches of rest broken by brief, calm awakenings. This feeds into a long-standing scholarly debate. Did Neanderthals experience sleep cycles similar to ours, or were theirs more flexible and segmented? Without clocks, alarms, or artificial light, the boundary between sleeping and waking blurs. Night becomes a continuum rather than a block. You feel that blur now. You're not fully asleep. You're not awake either. You drift, surface, drift again. There's no anxiety in it. No sense that something is wrong. This is normal here. Sounds travel differently in darkness. Every breath feels louder. Every shift echoes through the cave. But because you expect these sounds, they don't alarm you. Your brain has learned the nighttime soundscape. It filters familiar noises and flags only the unusual ones. This filtering is survival. In a world without light, sleep depends on selective attention. Total unconsciousness would be dangerous. Total wakefulness would be exhausting. So Neanderthals hover in between. There's a fringe but fascinating idea that Neanderthals may have had heightened low-light sensory integration. Better coordination between hearing, smell and touch in the absence of vision. Not sharper senses individually, but better blending of them. Nighttime would have trained this constantly. You feel it when someone nearby moves. You don't see it. You don't hear it clearly. You sense it through pressure changes, warmth shifts, vibrations in the ground. Your body responds before your mind names it. Children whimper softly in their sleep. No one startles. A hand rests gently, warmth reassures, and the sound fades. Comfort here doesn't require words. As hours pass, the darkness stops feeling empty. It feels protective. Light would expose you. Light would advertise your presence. Darkness hides you from the wider world. This challenges another modern assumption, that light equals safety. Here, light is a liability unless carefully controlled. Darkness is camouflage. You drift into a deeper sleep at last, not because you feel safe in the abstract, but because your environment has proven itself predictable. No sudden light, no sudden noise, just the steady, unchanging black. Neanderthals didn't fear the dark, they learned to rest inside it. A small sound pulls you upward through the layers of sleep, not sharp enough to alarm you, but persistent enough to matter. It's thin, fragile, a breath that stutters instead of flows. An infant. Children change everything about how a group sleeps. Here's the historical fact anchoring this moment. Neanderthal infant and juvenile fossils show extended periods of growth and dependency, similar to modern humans. This means children required long-term care, including protection, warmth, and feeding over many years. You don't get that without deliberate nighttime strategies. You feel the cluster tighten almost imperceptibly around the smallest bodies. Infants are placed where heat is most reliable, near the centre against the torso of an adult, often with multiple bodies creating a thermal buffer. This isn't guesswork. It's knowledge passed down without explanation. A quirky but revealing detail. Modern studies show that infants lose heat up to 4 times faster than adults due to their high surface area to volume ratio. In cold conditions, even brief exposure can be fatal. For Neanderthals, nighttime wasn't just dangerous for children, it was the most dangerous time of all. You watch, half asleep, as an adult shifts a hide upward, carefully exposing only a small patch of a baby's face. Nose-free, mouth-free, everything else sealed in warmth. The adult's body curves around the child instinctively, creating a pocket of heat and protection. This leads into an open, scholarly debate that carries emotional weight. How high was infant mortality among Neanderthals? Some researchers argue it was extremely high due to harsh conditions. Others point to the sheer persistence of Neanderthal populations over hundreds of thousands of years as evidence that childcare strategies must have been effective. Nights like this support the second view. You don't maintain a population across glacial cycles without keeping babies alive through winter. Another fringe idea surfaces here, that Neanderthal infants may have been carried and slept skin to skin more frequently than modern infants, similar to practices seen in many traditional societies today. Skin contact stabilizes temperature, heart rate, and breathing. It's ancient medicine with no name. You feel how alert adults remain even in sleep when children are near. They don't wake fully, but they don't sink completely either. Their sleep is lighter, tuned to subtle changes in breathing or movement. This isn't anxiety, it's calibration. Children stir often, they dream, they cry, they kick off covers. Each movement threatens the delicate thermal balance. Each time someone responds quietly, efficiently, without drama. This kind of responsiveness tells you something important about Neanderthal society. Care wasn't optional, it was built into nightly routine. You couldn't outsource it. You couldn't postpone it. Sleep itself bent around the needs of the smallest bodies. You think about the calorie cost of this vigilance. Caring for infants while surviving extreme cold demands enormous energy. That energy had to come from successful hunts, shared food, and cooperative living. Parenthood here was a group effort, not a solitary burden. As the infant settles, breathing, smoothing into a slow rhythm, the cluster relaxes again. Heat stabilizes, sleep deepens. This is where the myth of the brutish Neanderthal finally collapses completely. You don't protect children like this without empathy, foresight, and emotional bonds strong enough to survive exhaustion and hunger. The cold doesn't soften for babies, so the people do. The night doesn't belong only to the young. As the hours stretch on, you become aware of slower movements, heavier breaths, joints that complain so softly when they shift. These are the elders. And the fact that they are here at all tells you something extraordinary. Here's the historical fact anchoring this realization. Multiple Neanderthal skeletons show individuals who survive severe injuries, degenerative joint disease, tooth loss, and chronic illness for many years. These people could not have survived alone. They required long-term care, including help with food, protection, and, most quietly of all, sleep. You feel how the sleeping cluster subtly reorganizes around them. Elders aren't pushed to the edges. They are not isolated. They're positioned where warmth is steady and movement is minimal. The ground beneath them is better padded. The hides are thicker. This isn't ceremony. It's practicality informed by empathy. A quirky but telling detail. Some elderly Neanderthals lost most or all of their teeth, yet lived for years afterward. That means others processed food for them, chewed it, softened it, cooked it when fire was available. But it also means nighttime care mattered. Cold is harder on aging bodies. Circulation weakens, pain increases, sleep becomes fragile. You hear a soft groan as an elder shifts position. No one snaps awake, no one sighs in frustration. A hand adjusts a hide. Another body leans closer, sharing heat. The sound fades. Balance returns. This leads into an open scholarly debate that cuts to the heart of Neanderthal humanity. Why invest so much in individuals who may no longer contribute significantly to hunting or tool-making? Some argue elders provided knowledge, landscapes, animal behaviour, seasonal patterns. Others suggest care itself strengthened group cohesion, increasing survival for everyone. Lying here, you realise both can be true. Elders carry memory. But more than that, they anchor continuity. They are proof that survival doesn't end with usefulness. That matters when nights are long and brutal. There's a fringe idea that Neanderthals may have structured their groups around intergenerational knowledge transfer more heavily than we assume. Without writing, without permanent settlements, memory lived in people. Sleep clusters became classrooms without words, children absorbing patterns simply by being near older bodies night after night. You notice how carefully movement is managed around the elders. Sudden shifts are avoided. Drafts are blocked. Even breathing feels quieter nearby. Sleep here is not just individual recovery, it's collective responsibility. Modern life often separates the elderly, pushing them into isolated spaces. Here, isolation would be fatal. Warmth comes from proximity. Care comes from closeness. Aging is accommodated, not hidden. As the night deepens, the elders sleep lightly, waking often, drifting again. Pain doesn't disappear, but it's dulled by warmth and familiarity. And when morning comes, they will wake with everyone else, stiff, cold, alive. That's the achievement. Neanderthals didn't just survive winters as individuals, they carried each other through them. From infants to elders, night after night, they built a system where no one was left alone with the cold. And that may be their most human legacy of all. Sleep never fully loosens its grip on fear. It just teaches you how to hold it quietly. Even now, wrapped in hides and bodies, part of you listens outward, past breath and heartbeat, past stone and shadow, into the dark beyond the cave mouth. This is the hour when predators move with the most confidence. Here's the historical fact anchoring this tension. Neanderthals shared their landscapes with formidable Ice Age predators, including cave lions, hyenas, wolves and bears. Bite marks on Neanderthal bones and predator-modified human remains show that humans were sometimes hunted, or at least scavenged, by these animals. You hear it first as vibration rather than sound. A low, rhythmic disturbance carried through the ground. Footsteps padded with muscle and intent. Something large is moving nearby. The group doesn't explode into motion, that would waste energy and create noise. Instead, sleep thins instantly. Bodies stiffen. Breathing quiets. You feel it ripple through the cluster like a held breath. A quirky but revealing detail. Modern studies of human sleep show that, even in deep sleep, unfamiliar sounds trigger micro-awakenings in the brain within milliseconds. Neanderthals living constantly among predators would have had this sensitivity finely tuned. Sleep here is never unconscious, it's conditional. Eyes open in darkness, you see nothing. But others are listening too. Someone shifts slightly, creating pressure against your back. Not accidental, but communicative. Stay still, be ready. This feeds into an open, scholarly debate. How vulnerable were Neanderthals at night, really? Some argue caves provided near total safety from predators. Others point out that many caves show evidence of alternating use by humans and carnivores. Shelter was contested, not guaranteed. You feel how the cluster tightens subtly, compressing inward. This does two things at once. It conserves heat, and it presents a larger, unified mass. Predators prefer isolated prey. A dense group is confusing, risky, unpredictable. Another fringe idea emerges here. Neanderthal sleep clusters may have doubled as an early alarm system. With many bodies lightly asleep, detection probability rise. Someone hears, someone smells, someone senses vibration. Warning spreads through touch rather than sound. Outside, the presence lingers. You imagine amber eyes catching faint starlight, a nose lifted, sampling the air heavy, with human scent. This cave is offended. Not worth the risk. After a long moment, the vibrations fade, the ground stills, the night exhales, you feel your muscles release slowly. Not all at once, that would be foolish. The group eases back into sleep in stages, awareness lowering but never disappearing entirely. This constant edge, this background vigilance, reshapes sleep itself. Neanderthals didn't rest because the world was safe. They rested because they had learned how to be unsafe together. As your heart rate settles, you realize how much trust is embedded in this moment. Trust that others will hear what you miss. Trust that they will react. Trust that the system will hold. Fire might scare predators, but it also announces you from far away. Darkness and scent do the opposite. They blur your outline. They mark territory without invitation. Sleep returns, thinned but steady. The predator has passed. The night continues. And once again, you understand that Neanderthal survival wasn't built on fearlessness. It was built on shared vigilance, carried even into sleep. Sleep, when it finally deepens again, brings something unexpected. Not images exactly, not stories, but impressions. Motion without form. Heat. Hunger. The sense of running, of holding, of watching. You're dreaming even here. So were they. Here's the historical fact anchoring this inward turn. Neanderthals shared the same basic brain structures associated with sleep and dreaming as modern humans, including regions involved in memory consolidation and emotional processing. Whatever else differed between us, the architecture of dreaming was there. You drift through it now. Dreams don't arrive as neat narratives. They are fragments pulled from waking life. Animals, faces, pressure, pursuit. This makes sense. When your days are dominated by survival tasks, your dreams rehearse them. Modern studies show that people in high-risk environments often dream about threat, movement, and vigilance. Neanderthal dreams likely did the same. A quirky neurological detail. During REM sleep, the brain's emotional centers are highly active while rational filtering is reduced. This makes dreams vivid and intense, but also useful. They simulate danger without real cost. In a predator-filled world, dreaming may have sharpened instincts rather than distracted from them. This leads into an open, scholarly debate that borders on the philosophical. Did Neanderthals imagine futures the way we do? Did they rehearse hunts, dangers, or social interactions mentally, through dreams or waking thought? Some argue symbolic imagination is uniquely modern. Others point to burial practices, pigment use, and now sleep itself as evidence of rich inner lives. Lying here, half lost in dream fragments, it's hard to believe their nights were empty of meaning. You sense motion beside you, someone twitching in sleep, breath quickening. A dream chase maybe. No one wakes. Them fully. A hand rests gently, grounding. The body calms. Dreams are allowed to pass without panic. This tolerance matters. In a group where sleep is shared, nightmares can't derail the night. Emotional regulation isn't taught in words, it's enforced by environment. You dream, you stir, you settle. The group absorbs it. There's a fringe idea that dreams may have served as a social learning tool in early humans. Morning discussions, gestures, reenactments, shared responses could turn dreams into lessons. Even without language, emotion communicates. You wake briefly from your own dream, heart racing, then realize nothing has changed. The cave is the same, the warmth is the same. The bodies around you haven't vanished. Reality reasserts itself gently. That gentleness is important. It keeps fear from spiraling. It keeps sleep possible in a world that offers little reassurance. As dreaming returns, it feels less chaotic now, more rhythmic, like waves breaking softly, instead of crashing. Your mind is doing what it needs to do, sorting, rehearsing, letting go. Neanderthals didn't just endure nights physically. Their minds moved through them too, navigating fear, memory, and expectation in the only way available. Even here, even in the cold, the human mind keeps telling itself stories. And then, slowly, quietly, it rests. Morning is hinted at long before it arrives. Not with light, but with subtle changes. Air pressure shifting, the cave breathing differently, the faintest loosening of cold's grip. You don't open your eyes yet. You don't need to. Your body already knows the night is nearly spent. And this is where archaeology struggles the most. Here's the historical fact anchoring this moment. Sleep leaves almost no direct trace in the archaeological record. Unlike tools, hearths, or dead bones, beds decay, bodies move, nights vanish. Most of what we think we know about Neanderthal sleep comes from indirect evidence. Soil, compression, spatial patterning, plant residues, and the absence of things we expect to find. Absence becomes data. You look around with a new understanding, the flattened patch beneath you, the repeated use of the same spot night after night, the way debris clusters away from sleeping areas. These are the faint fingerprints of rest, visible only if you know what to look for. A quirky detail that surprises even experts. Some cave floors show distinct microlayers where fine sediments settled undisturbed, suggesting periods of stillness, no foot traffic, no activity. These quiet layers may represent sleep zones, moments when human movement paused for hours at a time. But interpretation is fragile. Was that stillness sleep, or absence, or ritual? Archaeologists argue about this constantly. One scholar's bed is another's natural sediment. This leads into an open, scholarly debate central to everything you've experienced tonight. Are we underestimating Neanderthal? Comfort because we don't recognize its traces? Modern expectations bias interpretation. We look for furniture, structures, clear separations between living and sleeping spaces. Neanderthals didn't build those. Their solutions were soft, temporary, and invisible to deep time. You feel that invisibility now. A thing about this night would survive 60,000 years intact. The warmth, the closeness, the adjustments, all gone without a trace, and yet survival itself is the evidence. Some researchers argue that the lack of elaborate sleeping structures implies lower cognitive complexity. Others counter that building permanent beds in mobile, cold environments would be inefficient. Why construct what you can assemble nightly from renewable materials? Lying here, it's hard not to side with efficiency. There's a fringe idea gaining traction that Neanderthals may have deliberately chosen low-investment sleep systems because they moved frequently, following herds and seasons, heavy. Beds, like heavy shelters, would only slow them down. Sleep had to be portable, adaptable, disposable. You begin to sense the group stirring, not waking fully, but shifting from night mode to day mode. Hides loosen slightly. Bodies stretch carefully. The cluster doesn't explode into movement, it unfolds. This unfolding is gentle because energy is precious. Mornings aren't triumphant, they're negotiated. As faint light finally reaches the cave walls, you realise something archaeologists can't measure easily. Sleep here wasn't about architecture, it was about behaviour. And behaviour, repeated consistently over thousands of years, becomes tradition, even if it leaves no monument behind. Neanderthal beds don't survive. Neanderthals did. As the cave slowly brightens, the night recedes. Not defeated, just paused. You stretch carefully, aware of every joint, every muscle that spent hours holding still against the cold. This is where the modern world rushes in with its theories, its arguments, its need to explain what you just lived through. And it argues a lot. Here's the historical fact anchoring this tension. Despite decades of research, there is no scholarly consensus on how frequently Neanderthals used fire, how comfortably they slept, or whether their nighttime lives differed fundamentally from those of early Homo sapiens. The evidence allows multiple interpretations, and each camp defends its view fiercely. One group of researchers argues Neanderthals were fully competent firemakers who simply left behind inconsistent evidence due to preservation bias. Another suggests they used fire opportunistically but didn't depend on it. A third proposes that fire use increased late in Neanderthal history, possibly influenced by the contact with Homo sapiens. You've lived a night where all three could be true. Fire would help, but you didn't need it to survive. You adapted without it. That flexibility may be the point scholars miss when they frame the debate as binary, fire or no fire, advanced or primitive. A quirky detail fueling this debate. Some Neanderthal sites show burned bones without clear hearth structures. Was this controlled cooking, or bones tossed into natural fires? Interpretation hinges on context, and context erodes. The same applies to sleep. Some scholars imagine Neanderthals shivering through miserable nights, barely surviving. Others envision well-managed systems of bedding, hides, and social clustering that made nights tolerable, if not pleasant. Both images draw from the same incomplete data. This leads into a deeper question scholars rarely phrase explicitly. Are we projecting our own discomfort backward? We imagine sleeping without beds or heaters unbearable because our baseline expectations are different. Neanderthals' baseline was endurance. You feel that difference in your bones now. You didn't sleep well, but you slept enough. Enough to wake, enough to function, enough to survive. Another day. There's a fringe perspective that deserves mention. Some anthropologists argue Neanderthal extinction narratives are biased by modern human self-congratulation. We assume they failed because they were inferior, less adaptable, less innovative. But their survival across hundreds of thousands of years of climate chaos suggests extraordinary competence. Maybe the real difference wasn't ability, but timing. Climate shifts, population pressures, and competition stacked the odds. Sleep systems that worked for millennia may not have been enough under new conditions. As the group fully wakes, the night fades into memory. No one discusses how they slept. There's no evaluation, no complaint. Sleep isn't an experience to analyse, it's a resource session to be used. This perhaps is the lesson scholars struggle with most. Neanderthals didn't romanticize their nights. They didn't narrate them, they lived them. And the evidence of that life is written not in fireplaces or beds, but in the fact that you're standing here at dawn, alive, ready to do it all again. By the time the sun finally clears the horizon, you're no longer thinking about the cold you endured. You're thinking about how many times this has already happened. Tens of thousands of dawns, hundreds of thousands of nights. The scale is almost impossible to hold in your head. And yet they did. Here's the historical fact anchoring this realization. Neanderthals survived across multiple glacial and interglacial cycles for over 300,000 years, longer than our own species has existed so far. That endurance alone places them among the most successful human populations in deep time. They didn't do it by inventing one perfect solution. They did it by outlasting. You feel that philosophy in everything you experienced last night. No single element made sleep possible. Not caves, not hides, not bodies, not biology, but all of them together, layered, overlapping, compensating for each other's weaknesses. A quirky but powerful detail. In endurance biology, systems built with redundancy fail less catastrophically. If one element breaks, others absorb the stress. Neanderthal sleep was redundant by design, even if no one articulated it that way. Fire goes out, bodies cluster tighter. Wind shifts, shelter orientation matters, food runs low, activity decreases, sleep lengthens. There's an open, scholarly debate here that reframes extinction itself. Some researchers argue Neanderthals didn't fail so much as get unlucky, caught between rapid climate swings and expanding Homo sapiens populations. Others suggest subtle differences in social networks or innovation speed tipped the balance, but none of that erases what you've just lived. A system that sustains life for hundreds of thousands of years is not fragile. You think about the nights that didn't go smoothly, the storms, the illnesses, the losses. Survival at this scale isn't perfection, it's resilience. It's absorbing shocks and continuing anyway. There's a fringe perspective that sees Neanderthal culture not as static but as deliberately conservative. When something works, you don't change it quickly. Rapid innovation can introduce risk. In a world where mistakes kill, stability is a virtue. Sleep systems are a perfect example. Why reinvent something that reliably gets you through the night? As the group begins to prepare for the day, checking tools, adjusting hides, scanning the landscape, you realize sleep here isn't separate from waking life. It's the foundation. A bad night ripples into poor hunting, poor decisions, increased risk. A stable night supports everything else. Modern humans often chase optimization, better mattresses, perfect temperatures, ideal routines. Neanderthals chased reliability, and reliability carried them through ice, predators, darkness, and time itself. As you step into the pale morning light, the cave behind you holds no monument to the night that passed. No bed frame, no hearth glowing. Nothing a future archaeologist could easily point to and say, here is how they slept. But the real evidence walks out with you, alive. Tonight, as you finally pull away from the cave and carry all of this back into your own world, something strange happens. The question that brought you here quietly dissolves. No fireplaces? Doesn't feel shocking anymore. It feels misplaced. Because what you've learned isn't how Neanderthals slept without something, it's how they slept with everything that mattered. Here's the historical fact that reframes the entire journey. Neanderthal extinction, around 40,000 years ago, was not sudden, uniform, or clearly caused by failure. Evidence suggests prolonged overlap with Homo sapiens, genetic exchange, and survival in pockets for thousands of years after modern humans arrived. This wasn't collapse, it was absorption, pressure, and timing. They didn't disappear because they couldn't sleep through winter. They had already mastered that. A quirky but telling details. Genetic studies show that many people alive today carry Neanderthal DNA linked to immune response, metabolism, and even sleep regulation. In a very real sense, parts of their cold-hardened nights are still inside you. This leads to the final open scholarly debate, one that's less about archaeology and more about perspective. Do we judge ancient success by who survives last, or by who survives well? Neanderthals endured climate extremes modern humans have never faced, with fewer tools, fewer numbers, and fewer margins for error, and they slept through it. You think about your own nights now, the thermostat adjustments, the blankets, the mild panic when the power goes out. Comfort has trained you to expect control, Neanderthals trained themselves to expect uncertainty, and that difference matters. They didn't wait for perfect conditions, they built systems that worked when conditions were bad, bodies close, layers redundant, expectations low, trust high. As you lie in your own bed tonight, soft, stable, absurdly safe by comparison, you may notice something shift. The room may feel quieter, the dark less hostile, the cold, if it touches you at all, less threatening. Because somewhere deep in your nervous system, an older rule stirs awake. Warmth is shared, sleep is enough, and survival doesn't require comfort, only balance. Now let your breathing slow, let your shoulders sink. You've walked through 400,000 winters and come back with a deeper night sense than you started with. No fireplaces, just endurance. You don't need to imagine caves anymore. You don't need the wind, the hides, or the press of unfamiliar bodies. Those lessons have already done their work. Tonight your bed is still. The air is calm. No predators test the edges of your sleep. That safety isn't something to rush past, it's something to gently rest inside. Neanderthals didn't fall asleep hoping tomorrow would be easier. They fell asleep trusting that enough was enough. Enough warmth, enough rest, enough care to wake up again. So take a breath in through your nose, slow and easy. Let it out just as slowly. If your room feels cool, let it. If it feels quiet, even better. Your body knows how to sleep in imperfect conditions. It always has. Long before mattresses, before walls, before firelight dancing on stone. Tonight you don't have to survive winter. You just have to rest. And rest, as it turns out, is one of the oldest skills you carry.